1-0, so not long before Scholes scores, he brought on Phil Neville for Giggs, purely to mark Javier Zanetti, who was giving me so much trouble, which I thought was interesting.
That's a real feature, isn't it, Lily, of him doing that? I mean, obviously you've got much later on Park Ji-sung coming into the games and doing just a specific thing against a specific player. Yeah.
I had a friend at uni at the time, no fan of Manchester United, and they'll not get out of that group. Of course they did. They'll only get past Inter. They'll not get past Juventus. Every single round, he was absolutely sure they were done for. He looked right. I'll say he looked right after that first leg of that semi-final, even though I remember Giggs scoring that equaliser. Antonio Conte obviously had already put Juventus early control. That away goal just felt like such a killer for British teams. Haven't quite got round to getting used to it. Giggs gets that back, but even then, as a neutral Rob, it felt, this 1-1's not enough. You needed one of those big Old Trafford nights, wee bit like Inter, everything kind of goes for you. You've got a margin. And I go back to early goal in the Nou Camp in that group stage. In the past, it's collapse. Now, this is not vintage Juventus, but with that away goal in their pocket, just over 10 minutes, they're 2-0 up. This is done. Any Italian team in this situation, it's the tie's over and the dream's over for another year. Is there anyone in the whoever you were watching that with or talking to around that time that felt, no, we just need one to come back in? Because like that night in the Nou Camp, there is a response. Keane obviously scores that header. There's a very quick equaliser, and all of a sudden, this narrative that we were getting so used to now about British teams just falling apart in these difficult big grounds, it's been turned on its head. The story's different.
Yeah, the only thing I would say, I mean, you're right. I thought I know when it went 2-0. I remember thinking, well, Juventus won the last two semi-finals at home 4-1, and this will be the same. But what I would say is, looking back, they weren't actually playing badly. Whereas, for example, Barcelona away, they were slaughtered for 20 minutes. They actually weren't playing badly. They just happened to concede two fairly shit goals. One is from a set piece.
Real Inzaghi.
Yeah, exactly. It's a classic. Yeah. And I agree totally with what you said in the previous episode, by the way, about Inzaghi. It's not kind of fair that he's seen as a bit of a joke now. Second one is a big deflection. They weren't playing badly. But having said that, no, I wouldn't have given them prayer. But you watch it back and you see that there is good kind of rhythm in the passing. Cole and York start to make things happen. And I mean, maybe you're kind of putting it on with hindsight. When it goes to 2-1, you think they're banging the game. I mean, I agree that Juventus won what they were. They finished like 7th or 8th, but they still had an aura. And they had played really well at Old Trafford. First half, they could have been 4-0 up. I mean, that should have been 2-0 up, probably on balance, but they had 4 big chances. They played Zidane as a number 10 in both games. You're talking about Del Piero, but it worked really well because they had David Deschamps, Delivio and Conte, Zidane behind Inzaghi. I couldn't get near him. But then it turned really quickly. And United just started to, Ancelotti will say that Juventus got too comfortable at 2-0, but I do think it was just a sheer speed combined with quality of United's attacking play that started to overwhelm them, really, and that intensity as well. So there was an element of Britishness, but clearly it was a bit more sophisticated, a bit more classy. Beckham again plays brilliantly. Giggs didn't make the game; he was injured. It's kind of touch and go. So Blomqvist plays really well. Didn't have a good final. York again, fantastic. Cole was really sharp. It's interesting that we remember this game obviously for Roy Keane's performance, but in the Italian press, I think Cole got man of the match in a couple of papers. So basically, it was like not quite the perfect forward performance, but something like that. I just think York and Cole throughout that season, the final is an exception, but away from home, they were just running teams ragged in a way that probably an English team hadn't done, certainly not since the ban, and not in my lifetime anyway.
The thing about the Keane performance, sorry, Martin, go on.
It's control. It's not going around kicking people.
Well, this is exactly what I was going to ask you, Davey, because we kind of talked about this last night. We're going to get to 2005 in due course, and Gerrard's performance that night is kind of compared very closely with Keane's and Turin, but you very much or not of that
No,
opinion?
yeah.
No, I am very much not of that opinion. Gerrard's performance is wonderful, right? But it's up and at him, Roy of the Rovers, we're 3-0 down, no control, and it comes off. Roy Keane's performance is different, and I think is slightly better because what he manages to do is look, we all love that story of one man just going and leading. But what Roy Keane did, because the situation that United were in, is he doesn't get them going. There's this myth that's built up that he gets them going with this sort of box to box charge. If he'd done that, Juventus would have picked United off, right? It would have been 4-0 by half time. It would have been done. He gets them going with his passing, right? And he starts off, it's such a great build up. He starts off with just getting on the ball and making simple passes, 3 yards, right? Square balls. Then he starts playing longer passes. And then the rest of the team, instead of panicking or thinking we're done, they respond. I don't think I've seen a performance where one man has basically gone round and plugged in the other 10, a stage where they could have been done. And it is different, but to me it was the level of intelligence and maturity, and not always maturity is not something that you always associate with Keane, because he could lose his temper, as we know. But in this case, had he played with tactical and discipline, lads, Gerrard could do it, and it would work. Sometimes it was wonderful. And I'm not in any way doing that thing where I want to praise one thing, so I've got to criticise. And I'm not. It worked. It was amazing. It was wonderful to watch. But in Keane's case, he realised, if I do that, if I start running a bit mad and cracking shots from 30 yards to try and get a response, this team will eat us. And maybe it was the respect that we talked about in a previous show that United had for Juventus. But what he does is so clever. Just give me the ball, and he starts off, as I say, simple passes, take the sting out of it. Then he builds up to, right, come on, and then he builds up to, let's go and attack. And what it does is it absolutely sparks the other players in the side from... I'm not accurately describing it. I hope listeners go and watch it, because it was such a mature and intelligent way of doing it, where he sized up the situation on the pitch. And I said to you guys last night, I really hate when I hear footballers say, "Oh, we had to get to half time so the manager could do a reset." Why? Yeah. Why can't you do it on the pitch? Roy Keane looked around and he said, "Right, we need to just..." And I just thought the control of the ebb and flow of the football match was absolutely outstanding. I don't think I've seen someone seize up a situation as perfectly and respond to it and come up with a 3-point plan, because it is, this is needed for the next 10 minutes. Then we need to do this. Finally, we'll do that. It was fucking outstanding.
Yeah, it's passing.
I liked some of the approaches in these two legs by Ferguson as well. I think he maybe tried the same trick I mentioned against Inter. He maybe tried to do that to Juventus in the first leg, go with a 4-4-2 against them, and maybe was just a little bit too open against has to be said, a much better midfield with Deschamps and Davids and Zidane in the middle. But he did tweak it. We started to see Beckham coming a little bit narrower, and I think they sort of continued that in the away leg. Beckham and Blomqvist played loads this year, much more than I
loved him. I thought he was brilliant.
Was this his only
pretty much
season?
He got injured and he effectively didn't play again. No, he was excellent in a lot of games. He was dreadful in the final, but he was excellent in a lot of games.
But I think
he did so good for Gothenburg against United, obviously.
Yeah, exactly.
That adaptability piece, I think Keane takes control, but I think there's just that adaptability there where he just solidifies things. I think Nicky Butt really helps in this game as well. If I'm honest, it wasn't... Scholes was obviously not on the... he didn't start. He came on and got the booking as we know. But I think having Butt there just helped Keane as well. That he could go and dictate if he had to. Obviously, he can then get up and get in for the header as well. So I think there was just a few things from the manager as well over both of these rounds for me, Inter and Juventus, where done something that never worked, and he's changed it, and he's adapted, and he's managed to get things going. But ultimately, yeah, Keane, York, and Cole in this one are decisive, because I think, as we said earlier on, when you're 3-1 down to Juventus away and they've got the away goal as well, you definitely need to do something. So Keane and the manager for me were both huge for this one.